For day one, I wanted to start out with what I consider to be the fundamentals, which is how to bear weight on your hands in a safe and a sustainable way, and also some simple ways that you can warm up your hands and your wrists. So we have a special name for how we bear weight on the hands in yoga, which we call Hasta Bandha. Hasta means hand, and Bandha means a lock or a seal, or I like to say a connection as well. So we have a hand connection to the mat. Here's how I think about the weight distribution in my hands whenever I'm on my hands, whether it's handstand, plank, chaturanga, downward facing dog, crow, all of that. You have different points on your hands and I want us to think about using all of this so that we can spread out the weight of our body, either all of your weight like in handstand or some of it like in down dog, so it doesn't all settle right here in your wrist. So the first thing I feel like I'm always reminding students to do is to spread the hands open. So not like this, not like this. I really want you guys to practice spreading your fingers apart so that you get all of this surface area when your hands are the foundation of the pose. Most of the weight will be in the heel of the hand. So I'm gonna number these. Number 1 is like where the most of the weight is in my hands when I'm on them. And I might also put like a smaller one on the pinky side of my palm as well. So here and here are where the most weight is. But I don't want all of my weight to be near my wrist, basically. And this is what happens when we spider the hands a lot, meaning they're not completely flush, the fingers are really bent. Oftentimes what that does is it flattens out this arch, this little pocket in the middle of your hand. It flattens it and it puts more of the weight into your wrist and the heel of the hand. So to avoid that, we think about where's the second most weight in the hand. I like to think of it as being the base of the index finger here. So I'm on the mat, I think about most of the weight here, then I really press these spots into the mat. And then third most weight, I think about then getting some weight into the base of the pinky finger. And then I also like to get like a diagonal support as well, pressing into the base of the thumb. You could just think about it as being 1, 2, 3. That's the same thing on the foot as well, but the palm is a little bit more square shaped, so that's why I like to get these other quadrants involved. Another place where it's really important to get some engagement is all of your fingertips. So I'm just gonna make a little 4. This is a washable marker, by the way, so don't worry. All of your fingertips. So in handstand, I've got all of these spots engaged, like gripping onto the mat so that I can lift out of the inner arch of my hand. I'm not squashing it onto the floor. This little pocket in here is kind of lifted away a little bit. And then this grip, I kind of grip the mat with my fingertips, and that helps me to balance better. It helps me to kind of fine tune the shifting of weight, which is constantly happening in handstand. And it also further helps me to get the weight out of falling just into my wrists. So here's a little practice that you can do on the floor in hands and knees. So we don't want to just smash our hands down into the floor. So when I really press my hand down without engaging any of those points or thinking about them, I can at some point start to feel this inner spot kind of make contact and collapse onto the floor. And we don't want that. This is the inner arch of your palm, and we want to keep that lifted away from the floor. So that's what contacting all of those 4 points around your palm does. It helps you to protect this little inner space here so that you don't put a lot of pressure into all of the little bones in your hand or your wrist. So I think about heels of the hands first, then I really connect to the floor or the mat with the base of my index finger here, and then I think about base of the pinky finger. And then I also am, as you can see, spreading my fingers apart, and I will gently grip the mat with my fingertips like this. And it's not like the spider, it's not like this, which makes it really hard yeah, it's like almost impossible to get the top of the palm involved in your Handstand, in your hand support, when you really spider like that. But you can gently grip and create like a tiny little like spider motion. Do you see here how there's like a little bit of lift, but it's not like this, so that this can happen. Those 4 points on the palm should be down on the floor, and then there's a little bit of gripping. So I do this in plank, I do this in downward dog, I do this in the push-up, and in handstand as well. As far as wrist warm-ups go, I don't do a really prolonged wrist warm-up. So usually I will do handstands near the end of my practice. I might do like a 45 to a 50-minute practice, and handstand kind of comes near the end. So I've already been on my hands a lot to warm them up. But of course I will stretch my wrists out no matter what before I pop into a handstand. If you think about handstand, your wrist is in quite a bit of extension here, which is what this is. So all of this is going to get really stretched. So it's a good idea to prep your wrist for this movement by doing this. And you get this wrist movement in plank already. You get some of it in downward facing dog. But you can, of course, plant your hands on the floor in tabletop and play around with that movement, which I'll show you in a second. And then, of course, we want to counter that with wrist flexion, which is bending your wrist like this, stretching the top of your wrist. And I do that, let's say I hop up into handstand and I try to get into it like 3 or 4 times. I'll come down and then I will flex my wrist like that, maybe in a standing forward fold. I'll do some wrist circles like this, and I'll shake my wrists out. And that's basically it. I don't do a very prolonged wrist warm-up. I find that, at least for me, those simple movements are enough. And I have healthy wrists, healthy hands. I really think that what we talked about first, Handstand, is the most important thing. What you could also do as an additional wrist stretch, if you want something more to kind of counter your handstand efforts. So let's say I just practiced handstand, I'm down on the floor now resting, and I'm gonna stretch my wrists. So in addition to the wrist flexion exercise I'll demo in a second, you can also just sit, let your hand relax like this, and you take your other hand and like a lobster claw shape, and you hold like between your forearm and your hand, so right around your wrist. So not just the hand, not just the forearm, right in between. And then I'm gonna squeeze with my hand, not as tight as I can, but I'm gonna create a little bit of kind of pressure in between by squeezing here. And what this squeezing does is it helps to separate the little bones in the hand. And then as I squeeze like that, at the same time, I'm gonna help my wrist into flexion. Not as hard as I can, I'm just taking that space in the bones as I then stretch the top of my forearm. And I'm also kind of pulling the skin down a little bit too, so it doesn't pinch. And then you can release, let go, maybe shake it out, and then feel how your wrists feel. So let me show you, just if I was gonna do a really short warm-up specifically for handstands in my wrists, this is what I would do. Another little tidbit, in any kind of hand balancing or hand support, down dog, plank, chaturanga, crow, handstand, I would pick either your index finger to be directly ahead, like here's my forearm, and then here's my index finger, straight line, or maybe the middle finger, or somewhere in between them. And I would try different ones and see which feels most natural to you. So I typically do my index finger facing forward. So I'd be in all fours, hands and knees. And to stretch my wrist, I would shift everything forward like this. Right, so shoulders over wrists, I'd come forward. So this is getting that extension in your wrists. And then I'd go back, maybe towards like a child's pose. So my hips are going way back. And then forward. And then back. Get it up a little higher in case you want to see the whole pose. Hands and knees, shift forward, shift back. And then to get even more wrist extension, which is what this is, you can turn your wrist around, fingers are really spread apart, and then I think about encouraging the heel of my hand down towards the floor. It may not get there entirely, but that's fine. You're going to stretch your inner forearm and the wrist. And of course, you would do that on both sides. And then you can practice your wrist flexion, which is the opposite of this. So you would turn your hand over on the floor, so the back of the hand is facing it, right? I'm just trying to show you different angles there. And then again, you might not get the hand all the way to the floor, but you might. And you'll feel stretch on the back of your hand, and you can curl and release the fingers if you want a little extra. So nothing fancy, nothing super involved. I definitely give my wrists some attention though. And I like the shaking of the wrists as well. I feel like it kind of just like an Etch-a-Sketch, it just erases everything. Especially after I've done my handstands, I feel like that really helps to break up any tension I created in my handstand practice. All right, I'm back. I'm gonna hold my little mic because I'm not sure if I clip it down here that you're gonna hear me. And that was a fleece sweatshirt, so it's really hot in here. And anyway, this is what's going on. The next thing I wanna talk about is when you first start practicing handstand, it's probably not gonna happen that you're going to jump up and be able to hold it for a long time right away. Probably, I'm not saying definitely, but more realistically is you're gonna have to do a lot of trial and error and jumping up and down and building yourself up into being able to hold a handstand with control is the key thing. What I wanna teach you guys is how to get up into handstand and hold it with intention and with control. So you decide you're going up, you decide when you're coming down. It's not like gravity just takes you down. When I first started practicing handstand, I didn't really have a handstand practice. I was doing yoga though, right? And I was fairly strong, fairly flexible, but I didn't quite have the strength for handstand because I just wasn't doing it. So how I started into my handstand journey, I'll call it, is I would just jump up onto the wall with one leg leading and switch legs, and most of the time I would bonk into the wall with my feet. But the thing is, to do handstand, you just have to spend a lot of time on your hands. And I was okay with not being able to hold it right away. Even if you're not holding it, the more you can just be on your hands, the more your body is going to start to learn how to hold you up in that position. So if you don't do handstand right now, I'm going to encourage you to start with a wall, right? A wall behind you. And I'll show you what I did in just a second and I'll explain. And just kick up until your foot finds the wall and then come back down and do it again. And even if you're not holding it, every trial, every going up and coming down is time on your wrists. You will strengthen your wrists and you'll start to strengthen your shoulders, which in my opinion is your balance point for handstand. I think the shoulders are number one important after the wrists. So here's what I would do when I first started practicing handstand. I'd probably be a little closer than that too, because I was a little bit more afraid then. So I'd be pretty close. And I would kick, and sometimes thunk pretty hard. Come down, other leg, jump. Sometimes I would thunk pretty hard on the wall, but I started to get an idea of how much force it took to get my body off of the floor, which is, I think, a pretty valuable thing to start to teach your brain right away, is how hard do I need to kick up if that's my entrance? How hard do I need to kick up to get my body at least to the wall? Because you know where that is, right? You know it's too far. And you might undershoot too, right? And not quite make it. And then you know you have to push harder. And that's literally what I would do. I would just hop up, feel the wall, come back down. And I would get tired and I would rest like this and I would stretch the backs of my hands, shake them out. And I would do this until I felt reasonably tired, not more than I could manage. So I never got to the point where my wrists were really hurting. I never got to the point where I felt like I just couldn't do anymore and I was forcing myself. I would do maybe that much as I just showed you, maybe like 10, give or take a few kick-ups. And I would do that every single day. And I did that every single day for, let's say, maybe about three months. So again, if you were just starting to practice handstand and that's what you were doing, you might think, oh, well, I can't really hold it. I'm just like hitting the wall every time. But that's exactly how I started. And it's not like you stay there forever, right? I stayed there for about a couple months. I didn't keep a log, but I'm gonna say it was just that for maybe 3 months. I was getting valuable time on my hands, strengthening my wrists, and I was getting an idea of force and how much it takes. And it doesn't take that much actually to get my body off of the floor. And then I started to problem solve. Okay, if I kick this hard, I overshoot and I hit the wall. If I kick up this hard, I don't quite make it and I come back down. That's all really valuable information for your mind and your body to start to learn. And your mind and your body will start to piece it together even if you don't feel like you're improving. Your body is learning every single trial what is working better. The next step is going to be hopping up towards the wall in that exact same way, but not hitting the wall. And if you don't have a wall behind you, that's eventually what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to know how to kick up and not overshoot, because if you overshoot, the wall may not be there, right? So you can't use it to kind of bounce off of. And even if you're going to stay at the wall, which is totally fine, kicking up and not hitting the wall is going to help you find what I call and other teachers call the catch. So your shoulders learn where to catch you so that you don't keep going backwards. So this is what that would look like. So same thing as before, I come pretty close to the wall. Like I might have like a foot here, like 12 inches or so, and my mat is right here. You could have your mat also just all the way flush to the wall like that. So the next stage would be, again, maybe like this or like this, and I'm gonna jump up and try not to bonk this heel into the wall. So I might do a lot of undershooting, but that's fine. I'm still getting time on my wrists, still strengthening my shoulders, and I'm starting to teach my brain where to stop, how much force to use. So I hop, try not to get to the wall. I'm still thinking about all of that hand stuff, right? Gripping with all 10 fingers, jumping up, whoop. And even if I do touch the wall, it's fine. I don't beat myself up. I'm just like, okay, that was a little bit too much. And you might catch it for a second and then come down and be like, yes, awesome. And you should totally reward yourself. And you can start to feel when you get tired, and it is tiring. And you'll start to bonk into the wall a lot more when you're tired, and just let yourself call it a day after that. Don't overdo it. Slower and steadier definitely wins in this one. So I would shake out, stretch my wrists, and I would do that again. And I probably did that practice, that jumping up and trying to control the force of my jump for a couple more months. So I probably did that, and I was just in a tiny apartment. I didn't have a lot of space. You don't need a lot of space. I probably did that for another, let's say, 3 months, really trying to control the force of my jump and find that catch where the body just kind of gets it, everything clicks into place. Again, the key is not so much doing handstands for hours and hours a day, but just doing it every single day. I would do this every single day for like 1 minute to 3 to 4 minutes, and I would make sure I was doing something that was a little bit harder, that I wasn't just doing what I was already good at. So I didn't just stay hopping up, bonk the wall, hopping up, bonk the wall. I made sure I was doing something that offered a little bit of a challenge. And that's the key, because what was hard will eventually become easy, and then you can build it up from there. You got to trust me on that. Just a little bit every day, gradually building it up is going to get you where you want to be in a healthy place, more than practicing for 3 hours a day or whatever, and trying to get there faster. You will progress fairly quickly if you do it this way, if you do it in a methodical, gradual way. To end day one's kind of lecture content, me talking to you about this stuff and explaining what I'm doing, I wanted to give you one drill, so a drill that I started out doing to strengthen my shoulders, and then a counter stretch. The drill is called Plank Plus, and the intention of it is to really strengthen the shoulders. But of course, plank, it's a high push-up position. It strengthens everything. It strengthens your legs, your core, your shoulders, even the back of your neck, right? But Plank Plus is getting into that high plank position, and then we breathe out and we round our back a lot. And the intention of doing that is to strengthen a muscle, not just that one, but specifically targeting the muscle called the serratus anterior. So here's your shoulder blade here. Just imagine this little triangular bone. The serratus is kind of like a hand shape. It actually goes the other way, and it comes from underneath your shoulder blade and grabs onto your rib cage. And when you engage that muscle, it pushes the shoulder blade. You can kind of even see mine do it forward. So it's a pushing muscle. Here's the shoulder alignment in plank, and then you can see what happens when I push. And the reason this is helpful is because your shoulders, I feel like, are the foundation of handstand. You can do like a half handstand with your legs kind of tucked in. You can do back bend handstands. So that tells me that the legs don't always have to be strong and engaged, and neither does the core. But your shoulders, you always have to have control of your shoulders in handstand. So Plank Plus will really help you build strength in and around your shoulders and your shoulder blade. So let me show you the whole exercise here. So we start in plank, good old regular plank, high push-up. And here, I'm actually okay with people do the opposite of this. Pull your pubic bone up towards your chin. I typically like people to have a neutral spine and not tuck like that, but here it's okay. Especially if you tend to sag in your core, you can tuck in. And then Plank Plus is this. You breathe in and you just stay in plank. And then you breathe out and you press more. You press a lot into your arms and shoulders, and your back rounds. You see that? And then you inhale back into plank where you came from. Don't go overboard though. Don't go like this. Don't sink. Back into plank. Breathe out, press, round. Don't do this. Don't go into down dog. Your body might want to because it's easier, but do a little bit of work here with me. Stay in plank. Breathe out, press, press, press a lot through your arms, round just your upper back. Don't move your hips. Breathe in, plank. Phew, and that's basically it. Let's do one more. Breathe out, round, press. You can feel your core really engage and turn on too. Plank, drop to your knees. Whew. Probably shake out the wrist after that. So that is called Plank Plus. I've also heard it called by a physical therapist who was my teacher at one point, serratus push-ups. So if you're a yoga teacher, you could do that and teach students about the serratus anterior and demo like that. It's a hard movement. Just make sure you're not moving your hips up and back. The hips stay pretty much where they are, and you're really isolating your shoulders. If this is super, super tough, and it is, you can always do this on hands and knees. So in tabletop, just try to get more of your weight into your arms than in your legs, if that makes sense. Press, round, squeeze the core. Breathe in, table. But don't arch into cow pose. Just stay kind of tucked. Breathe out. Breathe in. As a counterpose to this Plank Plus, a simple shoulder stretch, which will really help you to break up some of that tension that we created, which we need for holding handstand, but we don't necessarily want to take that tension with us, is called puppy pose. Puppy pose is a back bend that's on the knees, and it really is about the shoulders. And I'll show you two different angles for this. You start in all fours, and I've got space between my knees, about hips width distance. And the hips stay right here over your knees. And then to get into the back bend, you walk your hands forward towards the front of the mat, and I like to have people get their hands wider, so more towards like the upper corners of the mat. And then to get into puppy pose, you think about letting your head and the back of your heart drop towards the floor. So my back starts to slope and back bend, so it's not in a straight line anymore. And I'll rest on my forehead. So you can see how my hips are high, there's a slope going down my back, and you're gonna feel, among other things perhaps, a stretch here under the arm and down the side, and for some of you kind of in the front in the pecs. And you might also feel some compression, like a nice pressure in the center of your back. If you feel, when you come down into puppy pose, a pinching in the back of your shoulders, you can try one of two things. You can try taking your hands even wider. I'll show you a different angle as you come down to try to get away from that pinching. If it's still there, you can come down to your elbows. So I'm on my forearms right now. You can hold your wrists or your forearms and take your elbows out to the side and rest your forehead down on your hands. For this sequence, you can come down into all fours or hands and knees. With your knees about hips width distance apart or a little wider, you can untuck the toes behind you so they're down on the mat, and then you can send your hips back towards your heels, arms extended to the front for child's pose. You just rest there for a few breaths, feeling the stretch in the tops of your feet and down your back. And then you can breathe in and rise up into tabletop or all fours. And we'll warm up the back here in cat and cow, which is basically arching and rounding the spine. So you breathe in as you arch your back, and then you breathe out as you round and you press into your shoulders. You tuck your hips under. Breathe in and arch, tailbone rises, face lifts, and continuing with your own breath. Shoulders back from the ears somewhat when you back bend, when you arch, and then you can really round them when you breathe out. So from here, we can start to warm up the wrists some more, as I showed you in the very first video. So you can shift forward and backwards in your tabletop position. So there, I'm really shifting forward to extend my wrist. And then you can breathe out and shift back towards your heels, almost like you're going into child's pose again. And then you can flip one hand over on the mat, so the back of your hand is facing the mat. And then you can switch and turn the inner palm towards the front of the room, fingertips back towards you, and stretch your inner wrists. And then switching. And don't force, just be gentle with both movements. You can shake out your wrists as well if you'd like. From there, you can tuck the toes behind you and then breathe out, lift your knees off the mat and send your hips back so you're in downward facing dog. And here I like to explore bending the legs, really getting the stretch through my back. You can also extend the legs and feel the greater stretch down the backs of them. From there, you can roll forward into a high push-up position or plank. And there also you can play with a little bit of that forward and backward shifting for your wrists. You take a break by breathing out into down dog. And then you breathe forward again, plank. Breathe out, downward dog. Breathe in, roll forward, plank. That's the high push-up. And now we'll do plank plus. So you breathe out and you round your back a lot. Breathe in into plank. Breathe out, round, press through the shoulders. You can do as many of those as you'd like. Don't fatigue yourself too much. And you can rest by lowering to the knees and shifting back into child's pose. Hips towards the heels there. From there, you can rise back up, tuck the toes, and then lift the hips up into downward dog. And we're going to step up towards the hands into a standing forward fold. And if it's your first one, it's probably a good idea to bend the knees just to be easy on your hamstrings and your low back. We're set up near a wall with the wall right behind us. And then we rise into standing. You can take your hands to your hips, breathe in and rise up. And then taking a little back bend, you can bring your hands to your hips, breathe in and lift your heart up towards the ceiling, stretching the front of your body, and then breathing out back into alignment into standing or mountain pose. And then again, breathing in, shoulders back, chest forward, breathing out, arms down, everything in alignment facing the wall. You can breathe in, lift the arms up overhead, and breathe out, sweep the arms down and around. And again, like that, breathing in, reaching up. You can even lean backwards a little bit now with your arms. Breathing out, hands come down. And then again, breathing in, arms high, maybe a little back bend. Breathing out, come all the way back down into your forward fold. And now we're going to play with our handstand drills, that first one. So you're gripping the mat, head is relaxed. We're going to stretch one leg out behind us, that's the kicking leg, and you can bend the standing leg, and that one's going to hop. And you can touch the wall, come back down, hop again, bonk the wall, come down. So you can do a few times on both sides. Hop up, touch, come down. All right, now we're going to switch. Other leg extends out and you keep it really straight, and then you hop with the other leg. Hop. Sometimes you'll undershoot, sometimes you'll overshoot. It's okay. We're just getting the practice in. Then another, hopping up, bonk the wall, coming down. When you need a break, you can again lower to the knees. Sometimes it's nice to just get off of your wrists altogether, so you can sit back. Shake out your wrists or do, again, those wrist stretches. So I'm stretching the backs of both hands there. Another shake. I really like the shaking. Just kind of neutralizes the feeling in my wrist. And then you can sit. You can just sit facing the wall. I just wanted to face you so you could see what I'm doing. And we'll take some neck stretches now. So you're just sitting and you let one ear drop towards its shoulder, just side to side. And switching. And then stretching the back of your neck just by letting your chin drop towards your chest gently. And then breathing in, mouth closed, lift your chin up towards the ceiling to stretch your throat. And then to further cool down, we'll take our puppy pose. So you're on hands and knees, tops of the feet down, walk your hands forward, and your heart and your forehead drop towards the floor into a back bend. And again, you can take any of those variations with your arms. So you could hold your wrists and rest your forehead on your hands. And you take a few breaths there to really stretch the front of your chest and your sides. To come up, you can lift away from the floor somewhat, come to your elbows, and then rest all the way down flat on the floor. And just take a few deep breaths there that fill up around your lower back. And then we're going to flip over. So you can just flip on over like a pancake, rest down on your mat. You can bring your bent legs into your chest. And we're going to twist. So as you breathe out, take both of your legs over to your right side. Your arms can be gently outstretched in a T shape. And you can just look up towards the ceiling, or you can turn your head to or away from your knees. Either one is fine. To switch, you breathe in and lift your knees up to the ceiling, and then you breathe out, tip your knees to the left. Breathe in back to the center. You can draw the knees in really close to your chest. You can wrap your arms around your knees, and you can even lift your head off the floor and tuck yourself into a very tiny ball. And then breathe in to unwind. Let everything go.
Bring your arms out alongside you on the floor, outstretch your legs. And give yourself just a few breaths to rest here. Just face up towards the ceiling, breathing out any tension that was created from the practice.